Welcome back to the Investor Professor podcast. This is Dr. Ryan Peckham, and this is episode 43. On today's episode, we are joined with Shahin Najak, who owns Mindful Changes, a meditation and mindfulness company to help us try to reduce our stress, begin a mindfulness and meditation practice. And when I reached out to Shahin, she's like, okay, but you have a finance podcast. Why are you wanting me to come on? And I said, as you'll hear in this interview, that, when you deal with numbers, you deal with finance, it can be very stressful. And so years ago, I had to figure out a way to manage that stress. And I said, this audience, yes, they might be finance-based, numbers-based, type A personalities, but they're exactly the kind of audience that needs to hear that this is available, hear her story. Why does it matter? What are the health benefits? And, if I don't bring it to them, who knows when they'll ever stumble upon this, right? So to me, it was very important to bring somebody like this on. Shahin has multitude of certifications in mindfulness practice meditation. And so I'm very, very thankful that she was able to come on, spend her time with us, and to be able just to kind of open up and, talk about the difference between mindfulness, meditation. And so I really hope you enjoy this interview. So coming up next, Shahin with Mindful Changes.
You dropped this.
All right. Well, welcome back to the show, everybody. I am here with Shahin Najak with Mindfulness Changes, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to talk about mindfulness and meditation. So, Shahin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm so happy to be here. I could talk about this mindfulness and meditation for 24 hours if you gave me the opportunity. So thank you.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I appreciate you being on here. Like I said, this is normally we talk about financial topics. We talk about, but I always say that you have to invest in yourself, whether that's mentally, physically, or financially. So this definitely fits into the mentally category. And my first question for you is, can you just tell us what the difference is between mindfulness and meditation? Because I think that the terms are interchangeable for most people, or they don't understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And people get them confused. And mindfulness has become sort of like a buzzword, right? It's almost like McDonald's. And in fact, there's a book called Mindfulness. So, and it becomes like, oh, mindfulness of this, mindfulness of that. But people don't actually, the gravitas of what mindfulness really is doesn't really take hold until you really study it and practice it. So the difference between the two, and I'll keep it very simple, of course, is, maybe I'll talk about what the commonalities are between the two. Both of them are a training of the mind. Okay. And it's the training of the mind to be aware, to be in the present moment with acceptance. Now, both of them also have interrelated physical, emotional, mental benefits to our health and our mental well-being. The difference is that with mindfulness, you can do it anywhere, right? You're washing dishes, you can be mindful. You can't really, some people say that, oh, I meditate when I'm washing dishes, but you're not really meditating when you're washing dishes. You're being mindful. If you're noticing how the suds feel, how the water feels, the warmth of the water, if you're really present in that moment, you're being mindful. With meditation, it's putting aside a time of your day, a specific amount of your time during the day, and just sitting still with no expectations, nothing. It's almost like a no thing, right? With mindfulness, you're doing something, while you're being mindful eating, mindful walking, mindful whatever it might be. Now, I think that the reason people get confused with it is there is a form of meditation called mindfulness meditation.
Okay.
And that's why I think people get confused. So mindfulness is something you do during the day. At any time during the day, you can come back to the present moment awareness, which is really the definition put out by Jon Kabat-Zinn. Being aware in this moment with kindness, non-judgment, but being present in this moment. Like right now, I'm talking to you, I'm seeing you, right? With meditation, it's that concentration meditation where you're training the mind to not think about anything. You're just kind of being there, concentrating the mind. Mindful meditation is where you're present, you're sitting, and you're allowing the thoughts to go by like clouds with a thought bubble in them.
Right.
Or when I first started, I would imagine a cargo train going by, and my thought would go, and then it would get passed on. Right. So that was being aware of my thoughts, but during my sitting formal practice meditation.
So mindfulness, I would think it's basically being present with what you're actively doing, because I think our tendency is to think about things that have happened in the past or think about things that are upcoming. And so we miss the here and now because we're looking for something in the future, or we're thinking about something we wish we would have done better, or we're thinking about something in the past, right? So we just it's almost like we miss our life or moments of our life because we're thinking about other things. Is that fair to say? Absolutely.
So in the Pali word, mindfulness, is sati. Sati means, being bringing attention to the present moment, bringing an awareness to the present moment, which the Western definition has kind of taken. But the one part of that sati word, the Pali word sati, that hasn't been brought into our Western culture is remembering. That's what it also means, remembering where you are. So coming back to this present moment, remembering what you're doing. Have you ever been at a party or a wedding and you're all excited about going, and then you go there, or you're hosting a party, and then by the time it's over, you feel like you didn't even speak to a single person, or you didn't have any connection with anybody because you were so tense or anxious? So many of us have that.
Right.
Well, and so the mind and body are not connected. That's what we're doing.
Well, and I think we do activities where like we're on autopilot. So like people looking at social media and stuff. I've had a friend tell me one time that he realized like, okay, I got to figure something out, because he was on vacation looking at social media, seeing other people on vacation and going, man, I wish I was on that vacation. But he was on his own vacation, and he's like, okay, I got to put this down. Like I'm not appreciating where I currently am.
Exactly. So how many of us go to a restaurant, have a meal, and talk about the other meals we've had?
Right.
Or a restaurant we want to go to, rather than enjoying the meal that we're at. So that happens all the time. Because our mind is constantly moving. And, in the mindfulness world, we talk about the monkey mind. It's just going from branch to branch to branch. And it's training the mind to come back to the moment, like a puppy training, right? Just coming back to the moment with kindness, right? We wouldn't kick a puppy. We would just be really gentle. So that's what we need to do with our mind. Okay.
So what are some of the benefits of mindfulness and meditation?
Oh, yeah. So first one, self-awareness, right? You really become aware of your emotional reactivity. You really become aware of the stress that's in your life. And then we know that 80% of doctors' visits are due to stress, right? And chronic stress, yeah. And that's from Dr. Vivek Murthy in the States. I'm in Canada here, but he's mentioned 80% of doctors' visits are because of stress. And people don't realize it, because the stress, what it does is it shows up in your body, and it comes up as headaches, migraines, backaches, chronic pain, the blood pressure goes up high because anxiety causes this. I'll give you an example. A couple of days ago, my 17-year-old, she had a interview for a volunteer position. And so she went on it, and then she came down. She's like, Mom, I feel all sweaty. I'm like, oh, you must have been stressed. She goes, no, I'm not stressed. I'm like, well, your body's telling you differently. So what happens is we're not cueing in to our body sense. So one of the foundational practices of mindfulness that when I teach mindfulness, one of the foundational things I teach is mindfulness of the body, noticing what your body is doing and noticing what it feels like when it's happy and where does happy show up in your body, and
Right.
noticing when it feels like when you're depressed and what it feels like when you're anxious and multitasking.
Yeah. And it's like, and you have to be present or be practicing mindfulness to be able to pick up those cues, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that, like, for me, if I'm doing my meditations and things like that, I also sleep better. And I know that having better sleep leads to a lot of other health benefits as well.
Sleep is key. So what it does do is, yes, it helps you sleep deeper. And the other part I didn't mention with the benefits of mindfulness and meditation is the cortex, your gray matter. As we get older, our gray matter thins out, just the way our hair thins out. And so our gray matter thins out, right? Mm-hmm. And with mindfulness and meditation, what they found was your cortex actually gets thicker. And the amygdala, what I call the alarm part of our brain, that visibly shrinks.
Cool. Wow.
Yeah, so we're less reactive. We're more present in that moment. We're less likely to go around with like our hand holding, like our brain and our body holding up like a pencil really tight, and more like letting things be as they are and allowing them to come in without judgment.
So, when I started meditating a couple of years ago, just a little bit of backstory. So I've had my own investment firm for a while, and the stock market can be very, very stressful. And as I mentioned to you, but when we talked earlier, the numbers always change. There's always, every day you can do new calculations. It's part of the reason I love it and part of the reason I hate it. I love that the challenges change, but it also becomes, it can become overwhelming. So there's anxiety when you're dealing with people and their money and finances in general. Become high stress. And so I was just looking for something to be able to try to figure out how to drop that mental weight, right? That try to be able to handle it better. And so meditation for me became that way of like, okay, this is my 10 minutes to not think about anything. And I probably started, I'm 40 now. I probably started when I was maybe 34, 35. And most people, it's one of the only things, meditation is when I talk to people about it, it's like, it's hard to get people on board. Why is it? Have you found that? Is it like somebody has to be a certain age? I wish I would have known when I was younger, but maybe I wouldn't have listened when I was younger. So why should somebody younger really think about this?
Yeah. So the thing is that there were a couple of questions in there, right?
Sorry. I just kind of want
to. That's okay. I'm just going to parse them out a little bit. As the stock market is stressful for all of us, even those of us who aren't doing what you do, but actually look at our investments and go, ah. But with why is it so hard for people to do this, right? It's because our mind is always so distracted. It wants to be where it feels most comfortable. And the reason it feels most comfortable is that's what we've habituated our mind to do. That's how we grew up, with that habitual conditioning, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where your mind feels most comfortable. Oh yeah, I've been here before. I know that I can go to so many scenarios about what could happen, and I feel quite comfortable doing that. The problem with that is it's constantly putting our body in stress, and we don't realize it, but it causes chronic stress in our body. So once we realize that, okay, I need to take this mental weight off and come back to that meditation piece. Why do we meditate? It's because, and how does that mental piece get taken off? with meditation, what we train our mind to do is to understand what is inside our control and what is outside our control. So our prefrontal cortex actually has time to think, okay, this is a wise decision I'm making. Is this inside my control? And this is all done subconsciously.
Right.
And is it outside my control? If it's outside my control, I'm going to let it be, right? You know how people say, let it go? I like to say, okay, I'll let it be until something comes up where I can actively do something. So those are the wise decision things that happen when people start practicing mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. Why don't we start it earlier? Because I don't know if you had parents that meditated, but I know I had, my mom actually meditated, but she meditated for 1 hour a day, but she never, like, I would see her, but I didn't really know what she was doing. And I didn't want to sit around. So we don't actually model behavior for our children. It's like when I was at my gym, there was the sign there that said, it takes 30 days for you to notice a difference, 60 days for somebody else to know, your family to notice a difference, and 120 days for people outside of your family to notice a difference. So with meditation, the thing is that's why people quit so quickly in their diets and physical health as well, because it's hard. It's not easy. Right?
Yeah, I noticed. I mean, I tell people all the time, like the first, like, I don't know, week that you meditate, it's going to be awful. I mean, it's almost like when you tell yourself you're not going to ever eat a piece of chocolate cake, and then everywhere you look, there's cake. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with meditation. So you're sitting there trying to say, okay, I'm not going to think any thoughts. And then it's almost like your brain goes, okay, yeah. And it just goes into overdrive. And it's like you start having thousands of thoughts because you're not supposed to have any thoughts. Right. And so it's just like, what is going on?
So this is the difference between transcendental meditation and mindfulness meditation. This is why I really like mindfulness meditation, because there's nothing in there that says you can't think. You allow the thoughts to come through, because our mind thinks the way our mouth makes saliva. Right. It just thinks. The trick is the couple tricks. One is to just put in the right amount of effort. So if you're stressing too hard, I'm not going to think. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to think, right? It's that pink elephant thing. And then some people go, oh, I'm just going to sit here and see what goes through my mind. And then you're all over the place. So there's this really nice, if you think of an hourglass, right? The middle of the hourglass, it's that right effort, just the right amount of pressure, just the right amount of time. And that's where we sit with the effort to say, okay, there's a thought. There's a thought. And then you might, as you continue, you'll be noticing what those thoughts are about. Is it planning? Is it worry? Is it ruminating about the past? So then you start noticing it. And then as time goes on, and as the only way to do it is to practice. And as the more you practice, the more you'll notice that the time between the thoughts, initially they're like thought. Then it's like thought. And then the gaps become wider. Yeah. The good thing about this, and your formal practice scaffolds your daily informal mindfulness practice, is when you're in a heated argument with somebody, or you want to send that email out that says no, right? The thought, you're able to take that pause before you respond.
Yeah. And I think that's so key, because, you talk about the clouds going by with the words. I've noticed that when I meditate, if I have all those thoughts going, it took a while for me to notice this, but if I have a lot of thoughts going, my breathing is faster.
Yes.
And if I slow my breathing down, the thoughts slow.
Yes.
And then somebody talked to me, one time about, or maybe I read it, where your mind is kind of, if you're always thinking about the thoughts, it's like a boat on top of the water, and every wave is knocking you, you're changing your thoughts, and you're going from one thing to another. And it's kind of going deeper down into the ocean to where the waves are, you're further away from the waves. Basically, You're kind of calming your mind. And I think it's, once you start, all you need is one good session, one good session where you feel and you can, you're like, you come out of it and you can, it's almost like palpable that you can feel the relief. For me, like after the first one where I could actually tell, I was like, man, this is nice, but you have to get to that point. It's kind of like, like you said, the gym, somebody goes to the gym one day, they wake up the next morning, look in the mirror and go, well, that didn't work,
Yeah.
and they went one day. Right. So it's, you have to give yourself and give it a try for a long enough period of time.
Yeah, give yourself time. I'll just, when you talk about that boat or the ship, the one thing that we talk a lot about in when I teach mindfulness, I just finished teaching a course on 12 ways to build a mindfulness habit, right? One of the things we talk about is finding your anchor. So the ship's going to sail, right? But the reason the ship has an anchor is to stay rooted, right? So it doesn't go away. And that's the same thing with the mind and our thoughts. So breath sometimes can be used as the anchor, right? So we notice our breath, and you can just notice the belly moving and just come back to the breath. As you come back to the breath, finding your belly moving or just noticing air at the tip of your nose, finding one of those things, right? And as you practice more and more and come back, anchor, you'll notice that your breath slows down. It's a little bit less ragged, and your thoughts slow down as well.
Right.
And if you were to ask me, how do you start meditation, or what can you do so that our mind doesn't go? So those are two things. Another thing is, because our brain is, the left brain is highly active, right? The logical part of the brain, we like our numbers. So right. If you went from 1 to 10, and if you just want to start there and go breathing in 1, 2, and then, counting your breaths to 10. And then if you can do that, count to 20. And if you can do that, move up. But if you notice your mind wanders, you'll remember where you left off in the numbers.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So then you come back and start at the beginning. Oh, my goal is to hit 20, because we like goals, even in meditation. So that's
even in meditation.
Yeah, that's a beginning kind of a way to train the brain to come back. And if you're sitting, you could try it to 100. And then if you're at that stage, then you've got it so that you're able to really anchor that brain.
Yeah, I noticed that you talk about the numbers, and we like goals. I had to quit using this app that I was using, because it would tell me the days, how many days I had done this. And I started caring more about getting that day and seeing the count go up than I did the actual. And I was like, okay, this is not the point. Like, this is, I had to catch myself, basically.
That's a really important point you bring up, right? So there's so many apps right now, but sometimes they can be helpful, but if it's not the right effort, because if it becomes a thing that's one more to-do thing on your daily tasks, then we have to step back and go, okay, what am I doing? Right.
Right.
And yeah, it can, and then if we start looking at quantity versus quality, then that can become a thing too. So really coming up with, really focusing first starting with an intention, right? Why am I doing this? Who do I want to show up as? Who do I want to show up as today? Who do I want to show up with my children? Who do I want to show up as in my relationships 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So really finding that, why am I doing this? Right? That's a key.
So one of the things that I started doing was I have daughters. And when they were younger, I started meditating with them before bed. And it has been because they had trouble going to sleep. And that has been like the secret of all secrets to help kids sleep, is to have them, do some kind of, even if they just, I don't know if but it just calms them down. But now it's like part of the routine. And I mean, it works fabulously. And so they're now 12 and 10, but I probably started doing it 5 years ago.
Yeah. So I thank you for bringing that up, because I teach mindfulness to parents. And that's one of the reasons I got into this, is because our kids go through so much stress. In today's world, there is so much more stress than what we had growing up. And I tell parents that, even in the fourth trimester, just when the babies are born, even that's a crucial part. You can start doing modeling meditation right then, right? Because the kids pick up our energy. And at 10 and 12, they're picking up our energy. And if we're modeling it all along, and they start noticing that, oh, I can do 4 square breathing just before I go for an exam or a test, or right, like I can use my book that's on my desk to do my 4 square breathing. You can look it up on the internet if you don't like it. The breathing in, holding for 4, out for 4, and we can do it on the palm of our hands. I teach kids how to do finger breathing in and out. That's for the younger kids.
Right.
And right. So there's all kinds of breathing techniques that we start with the kids. For me, what I did with my kids was every time we hit a stop sign, we'd be like, oh, stop, let's breathe. And it's that training of the mind.
Right. And have you noticed an uptick? I mean, the last couple of years have been very stressful for people.
Yes.
And, have you noticed an uptick of, I mean, we see all these stories of mental health issues and people being in quarantine and all this. I mean, have you seen a rise in people being interested in this? Or do you think, what are your thoughts on the mental health side of this?
Oh, there's been a huge rise in it from where we were, right? And the amount of research that's happening in the mindfulness and the meditation field has been just astronomical. What I'm finding is I'm still finding that people tend to go for therapy for mental health issues first. And that's why I'm so passionate about bringing this to parents, because if we start doing this in our home, we find that, it builds resilience. And that's one of the benefits. It builds resilience. It changes our relationship with the suffering or the difficult aspects of our life, right? And one of the examples that I give is, it's like having a well of water, but no water in it. If we're not doing mindfulness, then when things really get hard, when grief hits us or something challenging happens in our life, there's nothing to go into. We don't have the resources. But when we fill that water every day with our mindfulness and meditation and really build our brain and our mind and our body, then when things happen, and we get stuck in that grief, or we get stuck with the many challenging situations that happen in our lives, then we can go into that well and bring out those resources that we need, right? And so that it builds resilience. We have that little bit of padding there.
Right. Yeah. And that's, again, we talk about, physical fitness, and this kind of goes right along with it. Mental fitness is also important. And like you said, having something to draw back on or something to help you with that becomes key. Because I think so many times we're just looking for an out, whether it's a TV show or we're looking for some kind of escape, instead of learning something that actually has some science behind it, some medical history on that actually helps you manage that mental weight, or whatever you want to call it. It's just amazing how much or how beneficial it can be if you give it a true try. I always say that, a true try, not like 2 days.
Yeah, I like that. I think I'm going to steal that.
Because that's and it's hard because a lot of the people, and the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people that listen to this program are all type A's. And that's why I brought up that about, we all have goals. We're all looking at, I'm like, okay, man, when I'm sitting there trying to get day 363 in a row, and then I notice okay, am I doing this for me? Or am I doing this to hit the number? And just making sure that you keep that up. So, well, how do you recommend that people start?
Oh, yeah. Good question. Start with the intensity that suits you. Right. So if you're one of these people who is just completely overwhelmed you're tired of life, you're stretched so thin that you don't think you can carry on again or anymore, it's time to take that break during the day. So it's time to put aside even 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, but be really intentional about it. Write it down, calendarize it, right? Because if you think, oh, I'm going to do it at lunchtime, or I'm going to do it after dinner, or I'm going to do it before dinner, or I'm going to do it after the kids go to bed, it's not going to happen. So you have to calendarize it just as you would a meeting. So this is a meeting with yourself. So if you're overwhelmed and you just need to take it slow, take it down a notch or two, it's time to do that formal sitting practice. And just taking those breaths and using that anchor, using a breath as an anchor, or putting out a candle, and really having that space that you enjoy sitting in. And then letting everybody know, I'm meditating, I'm here, right? And the research shows that 20 minutes is ideal for starting. At 45 minutes is the best. But 20 minutes is that ideal time, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. But if you don't have that, start with 5 and build up. You'll notice you start with 5 and then you'll end up sitting for 10. Mm-hmm. And you'll notice at the beginning, you'll be like, oh, that was 10 minutes already.
Yeah, I had to start smaller. Like I couldn't, like the 20 minutes was too much for, like, I think I started with 5 and then I got to 10 pretty quick. But in the beginning, it was too hard. Like it was too, I don't know, intimidating, if that's the right word. But I was like, man, I don't know if I could do this for 20 minutes. I mean, it took me a little bit to work up to. But do you recommend, like, so you're talking about put it on like same time, same place? Does that help? Like if you do it in the same part of your home or same part of your office, same time every day, is that what you recommend?
So that really helps because it builds that habit, right? It builds that habit of, okay, this is what because the brain recognizes it as, oh, okay, this is comfortable to do. As soon as it gets used to it, it goes, oh, it's just like working out at the gym, right? Initially it's hard, and then you build a few muscles and you're like, oh, okay. And then your brain likes it. So that's what we're trying to do. Engage the brain to say, no, this is a good thing for me. So ideally, same time, same place. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only time you do it, right? So this morning, I was feeling I was feeling some tenseness, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a lying down body scan meditation, 5 minutes, work through it, and it just clears out the tense, right? So starting with that, and when I teach the MBSR program, the mindfulness-based stress reduction, we literally start with 1 minute. 1 minute is all you need to start, and then as you build that habit, just the habit of sitting at the same spot at the same time, and then building it, and you'll notice that you can be a little bit more flexible as you become more agile in your meditation practice. So that's one thing. The second thing is you want to scaffold that with your daily informal practice. So if you're getting a cup of coffee, right, instead of just having it, noticing the warmth of the cup, noticing the scent, and just using your 5 senses, and then having it like a mindful cup of coffee, right? So that's what you're doing, is you're slowing down and you're training your brain to say, I can pay attention. I can bring my attention down to this moment, right? So with that, we build our capacity.
And that's the mindfulness piece, right? Like when you're being cognizant and present, and you're focusing on whatever you're currently doing, like the cup of coffee you just mentioned.
Yeah.
That helps you stay in the moment, in addition to the meditation practice that we discussed. Yeah. I've noticed that this helps me in stressful situations where you can just kind of take a deep breath, close your eyes for a second, and kind of let things fall off. I'm talking about like just like being on an airplane and there's a screaming child next to you. I mean, like those kind of things. It doesn't have to be something you're directly, with, or somebody in front of you. But I've noticed that it definitely allows you to be able to like you start having like this compartment in your brain that you can escape to, that is kind of like your safe place or something. And I didn't really think about that when I started. I just feel like that's like a benefit that I've noticed later on.
Yeah. And you'll notice that as you go through, as you meditate more and more, you'll notice that if you start be doing that mindfulness piece, you'll notice you'll be able to delve in and go, okay, what's my heart doing? How does my heart feel? Where am I feeling that agitation? And really keying in. And then you can actually slow it down. If your heart's racing and you're like starting to get frustrated about the kid in the airplane, you can actually intentionally slow down that heartbeat. Wow. Slow it down so that you're like, okay, I'm going to let it be. There's frustration. Frustration is rising. Anger is rising. So I'm not angry. I'm not frustrated. It's okay. That's the feeling that's coming out. And you're noticing it. That's the informal practice of mindful meditation.
Okay. Well, and it's also just, I mean, with all of your emotions, I mean, you start to have better control over everything. I'm sure anger, anxiety, I'm sure the studies show that you're able to handle a lot of your emotions. I know with me, with the market and dealing with clients and things like that, it's just the anxiety that's there. I mean, a lot of times people look to me to be the calm one. So this definitely helps, to help carry that weight, if you will. And so I think that there's a lot of benefits. It's just that I think a lot of us, like you said earlier, we've never known anybody that does it, or we didn't grow up with somebody who did it. Nobody's introduced us to it. So it's something you hear about, but you don't really know about it. You know it exists, but you don't really know what it is. And so then when you start to look at it, like you said, there's a lot of different kinds. And so trying to figure out what the difference is between the different kinds becomes kind of an issue for people. And so, having somebody that is an expert at this, it definitely helps for sure.
There's a beautiful book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Mm-hmm. And what he talks about, there's a quote that he says, and he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And within that space is something about, and within that space is our choice.
Right.
So when something happens, so that's what mindfulness meditation does for us. When something happens, when we're onslaughted by something, that's the stimulus. And are we reacting or are we responding wisely? Mm-hmm. And between that response and what happens, there's that beautiful space in the middle. That's what the meditation gives us. And that space is where we get to pause and go, this is how I'm going to respond. That's where we choose our response.
Yeah. There's a lot of data too that shows that our ability to concentrate keeps going down and down, basically down because of like social media and things like that. We want everything to be 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 seconds, whatever it is. So, the studies show that we're losing our ability to concentrate for longer periods of time. And I think this is a way to kind of recapture some of that time, because when you have to focus for 10 minutes or 20 minutes on your breathing, on that, I mean, you're retraining your brain to be able to concentrate. Am I wrong on that? Or is there something that backs that up?
You were absolutely right. I was just looking for a piece of research I had here, but what happens is, and this is why I think it's so powerful for kids as well, is because our attention increases, our ability to be attentive to something and focus on this project or what we're working on right now, it increases. And that's powerful in all our lives, right? So when we're having a conversation with somebody, to be able to be really mindfully communicating and really be paying attention, that can change our life, right? Mm-hmm. How many people do we know that we say our name to and they leave and they're like, who was that again? Right? I didn't catch the name, right? So, and there are so many methods, right? You can ask again, but if you're mindful, I didn't catch the name. And if you ask again, but we have to be aware that we didn't catch the name. If we're not even aware and say, what did we talk about? Right? That's where the mindful piece is missing if we're not in the present moment. So yes, our focus, our attention increases. There's a 6-week program where we do the mindfulness of the body. I told you is the first.
Mm-hmm.
Then we talk about mindfulness of thoughts and how, and you know, there's different meditations, guided meditations that we go through. And then there's mindfulness of emotions, of what kinds of emotions are we having, right? And then mindfulness of forgiveness, mindful communication. So all of these things help build our body back to, okay, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up?
Yeah, and I think you talk about, I mean, like you talk about all the different levels. I mean, this is definitely it's definitely a journey, you know, with peaks and valleys like anything else. I mean, it definitely takes some commitment. And there's people that I've known that have done it very well for 6 months, and then they kind of, I don't know, you know, they don't think about it as much for 3 months, and they come back. And I mean, it's something that I think that flows with you throughout your life once you start doing it. But yes. Are there any books you recommend or things that you recommend for somebody when they're starting, or?
There are so many books.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like when somebody asks me what finance book they should read.
Yeah, right. So it depends. So it depends on how much they've been doing mindfulness.
Well, I'm talking about just somebody who's just starting out. Like, let's say somebody doesn't have a practice at all. This is something they're interested in. I'm just thinking of like a resource for them to go to. You know, we'll give them your website and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But
so here's a book actually right now.
Okay.
It's called The Mindfulness Solution: Everyday Practices for Everyday Problems.
Okay.
And that's a really good one. Anything from John Kabat-Zinn, that's Jon Kabat, Kabatzinn.
Okay.
That's a really thick book. It's the Full Catastrophe Living. So that's a bit more detailed. Anything by Jack Kornfield.
Okay. So, and I have to ask you, what do you think about like all these apps have exploded over the last couple of years, right? So there's Calm, there's Headspace. I'm sure I'm missing out. There's got to be some more. I mean, I know there's more, but what is your thoughts on all these apps that have just been coming out? And you can give us your honest opinion.
Yeah, you know, I don't use any of the apps. My brother uses Calm. He loves it, but he's not been a meditator, but he can't get away from it now. So like he uses it and he loves it, and that's great. Some people love them. And for me, I find that it gets me too involved with the person that's speaking. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I'll be honest with you. For me, it doesn't work. I know people for whom it does work.
Yeah. I sometimes like to have something that just like, I don't know if it's bells or it's just the Om sound that happens every minute or 30 seconds or so. You know, I really don't know what the sound is. I just know if I heard it, I would know it. Yeah. But something like that, some of those meditative apps where somebody's constantly talking,
I can't.
It throws me off. Like I don't like that. You know, but I know that some people in the beginning like that, and there's some that, you know, it's really, I think the big key to this is you kind of got to figure out what your own style is and what works for you, because there's not one thing that's going to work for everybody.
That's so true. So what you're referring to is, and in the apps, it's more like guided meditation, and then there's visualization meditation. So it's taking you away from you and going into a space. So for some people that works. So guided visualization. What I do like, and I'm glad you brought that up, those sounds, is the sound baths.
Okay.
Those are those sound baths.
Yeah.
If you go on Insight Timer, and that's an app I like. I do like that app because if you search for the sound baths, so sometimes when I want to get out of my body, I don't want to be in my breath, and that's happened when I've had grief in my life. I want to get out of my body. I don't want to feel it. Right. So when that's happened, I need to concentrate and do a concentration meditation on a sound bath. So that's my anchor.
Okay.
So I really enjoy those sounds.
Okay. And you said it's Insight Timer. Is that right?
INSIGHT.
Okay.
Yeah. Insight Timer. Yeah.
Great. Well, is there anything I should have asked that I didn't? Or do you think this is we covered it pretty much?
Yeah. Practice, get on the cushion.
Yeah. So how does somebody find you?
So you can go on my website. It's mindfulchanges.com.
Okay.
And on Instagram, I'm really not that present on social media, but on Instagram, it's the handle is mindful change.
Okay.
Number 4, and then U, the letter U. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't really be a mindfulness meditation person and be super active on social media. It really wouldn't go together, right?
No, it's just not me. It's mostly word of mouth, but I'll send you the actual website and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put it for everybody to see in the show notes.
That would be great.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this with us. Like I said, we have a lot of younger listeners, and I probably started meditating when I was like 35, and I wish it would have been 25 or even younger. I think that it works very well if you really do give it a shot. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I love talking about this, passionate about it. Start every class that you teach with a 1 minute, just a present moment. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, my conversation with Shahin. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope there's some takeaways for you that you can start to practice in your daily life that'll help you reduce your stress, allow you to be more mindful of the positives that you have in your life. Also wanted to make mention that next week I'll be traveling. I have a great trip to Omaha planned, going to the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting. And so I'm excited about that. Have somebody going with me, a friend now, used to be a former student. So maybe I'll let him take over the Investor Professor Instagram account, and you can see what's going on as we go through next weekend. Everybody's always wondering what people wear to Coachella. And if you want to know what people are wearing to Omaha, the answer to that is khakis. It is a lot of khakis. I will not be in there. I refuse. So look for some updates on that. And we'll see you next time, everybody.